She still thinks she's worth something. Marla didn't whisper it. She said it like a toast, loud enough for every clink of glass to fall quiet around her. The barbecue smoke curled in the air, but it couldn't smother the sting of her words. And just like that, the reunion was no longer a gathering. It became a reckoning. Nova's fingers tightened around mine. Her head barely reached my waist, but she sensed it. She always did. The shift. The cold. Jay chuckled without even looking up from his plate. She should be grateful we let her in. I didn't flinch. I smiled. That was my defense. Smile, hold your breath, and swallow the shame. I had done it for years. But this time, the air felt thicker. More dangerous. Like the past and present were colliding inside me. I turned to Delilah, my mother, not because I expected her to defend me, but because I needed to see whether there was any trace of warmth left. She didn't meet my eyes. "She's a guest," she said, and sipped her wine. Guest. The word hung in the air like fog settling over a cemetery. I let it sit there. I didn't argue. I had promised myself that today I'd stay composed. For Nova. 3 months earlier, I had packed everything we owned into the back of a dented SUV and driven 2 states to reclaim the only place that had ever felt remotely like mine, Grandpa Walter's house, the one on Elder Pine Street, weather-worn, neglected, nearly forgotten. But he hadn't forgotten me. Hidden inside the pages of a worn-out novel was the will, handwritten, notarized. It said everything in plain ink. I leave this house to my granddaughter Avery because she showed up when no one else did. He'd never told anyone. And I hadn't either. Not yet. We arrived with peeling suitcases, sleeping bags, and more hope than certainty. The floor creaked with every step. The windows cried in the wind, but we called it home. Nova called it our castle. I called it a beginning. When the reunion invitation came, a group text without punctuation or warmth, I hesitated. I almost didn't go, but something in me wanted Nova to have cousins, to know laughter and belonging. I told myself maybe things had changed. They hadn't. The driveway was full of leased SUVs and laughter that stopped as soon as we stepped onto the lawn. People waved without smiling. The folding chairs were arranged like battlements. I brought peach cobbler in a glass dish older than my childhood. Marla greeted me with a smirk. Jay asked if I needed help finding the guest's entrance. My uncle passed me a trash bag before saying hello. I did what I'd always done. I smiled. I stayed small. Nova clung to my side like she could feel the tremble beneath my skin. I told her to be polite, to let Mommy handle the grown-ups. She nodded, her eyes darting from one face to the next, soaking in more than I wanted her to understand. We sat in the shade, just far enough to be forgotten, but close enough to hear everything. Someone asked about the house. Marla tilted her sunglasses down. "So, Avery, how long are you planning to stay in the old man's place?" "Just until you get back on your feet." Before I could answer, Jay jumped in. "Smart move, though. Start with something cheap and build up from there." I could feel the burn crawl up my neck. I said softly, "We live there. It's our home now." Delilah didn't hesitate. "It's still Walter's house to me. Not yours, not his gift to you, just Walter's." As if I'd snuck in after the funeral and claimed what didn't belong to me. Marla snorted. "I still remember when he told me how disappointed he was that you dropped out of school. Said he wanted better for you." Jay raised his glass. "He probably rolled in his grave when he found out you were back." Their laughter wasn't loud, but it was sharp, dismissive, designed to slice quietly. I felt Nova's hand let go of mine. She sat up straighter, her face hardening. And that's when I realized she wasn't just listening anymore. She was about to speak. "You probably think living there makes you someone again." Jay's words landed in the center of the picnic table like a stone dropped in still water. There were no raised voices, no shouting, just that one sentence, slick with contempt, followed by silence that dared me to respond. I didn't. Not right away. Nova was focused on peeling the label from a soda bottle, pretending she wasn't listening, but I could see the tension in her shoulders. She'd heard every syllable. "It's not about being someone," I said finally. "It's about finally having something of my own." Jay smirked. "Right? Because Grandpa left it to you in some secret will none of us ever saw." Delilah, seated with her legs crossed at the ankle, didn't say a word. Her silence was as deliberate as a verdict. Marla stirred the ice in her lemonade. Honestly, Avery, we all assumed the house would go to Mom, or at least be split up somehow, not just handed over to you like a pity prize. I looked down at the table, then at Nova, then back up. I didn't ask for it. I didn't expect it, but he gave it to me. Marla snorted. Maybe you manipulated him. You know how emotional he got toward the end. I could feel my heartbeat in my teeth. Grandpa was a lot of things, I said slowly, but he wasn't senile. He knew exactly what he was doing. Jay leaned back in his chair. Then show us the paperwork. If it's real, let's see it. I didn't answer, not because I couldn't, but because I knew the truth wasn't something I owed them on demand. They didn't want the truth. They wanted control. The irony, of course, was that none of them had stepped foot in that house in over a year. Not when the roof was leaking. Not when the floors were warped. Not when Grandpa was dying slowly in the living room, asking me to read the crossword clues out loud because his eyes were going. I was there. Nova was there. We scrubbed mold out of the corners. We made soup when he couldn't eat solids anymore. We stayed. They didn't. And now they were here. Forks scraping paper plates, laughing at a child's dress shoes, and judging the woman who never stopped showing up. Delilah finally spoke. I just think, if your grandfather really meant for you to have that house, he should have told us. He didn't owe you that. Her eyes narrowed. He owed us something. No, I said, louder than I meant to. He owed himself peace, and he gave it to me. That's why he left it. Nova shifted in her seat. She looked at me, not with confusion, not even with fear, but with clarity, like something she'd been sensing all day had finally clicked into place. Jay chuckled darkly. You've always acted like a victim. Maybe this is just your latest performance. And that's when Nova stood. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't flinch. But her eyes, wide and focused, cut through the group like glass. You're not supposed to talk to my mom like that. If Grandpa really loved you, he would have said it in front of all of us. Marla's voice was ice meant to sting, not slice. But it did both. Nova's hand, still resting on the table near mine, twitched slightly. I didn't look at her. I couldn't. My eyes were fixed on the lemonade glass in front of me, catching a glint of sun that felt sharper than usual. I could have screamed, could have thrown every receipt, legal form, notarized paper I had at them. But what I carried was heavier than a piece of paper. It was something I hadn't told anyone, not even Nova. And I had found it in a place they would never dare look. The attic. The day I unlocked it was warm, the kind of southern heat that made even shadows sweat. Nova had been playing on the porch, humming to herself, and I had been chasing a loose floorboard sound I couldn't place. The attic stairs creaked like an old man's knees. Dust swirled in the light like ghosts waking up, and then I found it. A shoebox, unlabeled, ordinary. Inside, cassette tapes, 3 of them, each marked with Grandpa Walter's handwriting. One of them simply said Avery. At first, I didn't want to press play. I thought maybe it would be something painful, a regret, a goodbye, a truth I wasn't ready for. But my fingers moved anyway. The recorder was old, but the batteries worked. And then his voice. If you're hearing this, Ave, then I've gone. And I'm sorry I couldn't say this in person, but you know me. I was never good with feelings in front of a crowd. I sank to the attic floor. You were the only one who stayed. You didn't come out of duty. You came because you cared. I saw it, even when you thought I didn't. He cleared his throat on the tape. I gave you that house because it already belonged to you, long before I signed anything. You made it breathe again. You made me breathe again. I don't remember how long I sat there. Just the way the floorboard under me felt steady finally, like something clicked back into place. He hadn't just written it down. He had spoken it, with a voice cracked by time and truth. Not just a will, but a confession. So now, hearing Marla say he would have never chosen me if he really loved me, all I could do was breathe, because I knew something they didn't. I found a tape, I said quietly. Jay snorted. What, like a mixtape? You gonna play us Grandpa's favorite country songs? No. I met his eyes. A recording, his voice. Talking about me, about the house, about all of you. Delilah blinked. You're lying. I'm not. My voice didn't shake. He recorded it not long before he passed. He talks about why he left it to me and what he saw in this family before he made that choice. Marla crossed her arms. Let me guess. You're going to say he called us all ungrateful. He didn't have to. I looked around. You're proving it for him. Jay laughed, short and mean. Play it. Let's hear the big dramatic speech. I will, I said. But not because you demand it, because someone here deserves to know the truth. From the corner of my eye, I saw Nova move. She had pulled something from her backpack, a small, beat-up tape recorder. She placed it on the table with both hands, gently, like it was sacred. I brought it, she said softly, just in case. I looked at her, really looked, and for a second, I wasn't standing on a porch with people who hated me. I was standing in the courtroom Grandpa had built in that attic. And the verdict was coming. I pressed play. She's just a child. What does she know about family? Delilah's voice cracked across the porch like dry wood splitting. And still, Nova didn't move. She stood with her hands by her sides, in her scuffed sneakers and the blue sundress I had ironed for the occasion. Her hair had started to frizz under the heat, but her eyes, those eyes, never blinked. She knows how it feels to be ignored, I said quietly, to be spoken over, to be looked through. Jay laughed once, a dry exhale. So now you're letting your kid fight your battles? No, I said. I've just finally stopped teaching her to stay silent. Nova stepped forward just a little until she was in the very center of the circle. The family fell into an uneasy hush, like even the furniture knew something sacred was happening. My mommy didn't ask for this house, she said, but Grandpa gave it to her, and she makes it nice again. We made the kitchen smell like cinnamon last week. No one said a word. The plastic chairs creaked under shifting weight. Even Marla's usually smug face looked uncertain. Nova took a breath. You all came today like you own it, but you don't. You left it. You left him. Travis looked down at his hands. Delilah's fingers tightened around her glass. Nova kept going. I remember when Mommy painted the porch, she had blisters, and when she found Grandpa's old photos, she cried. Not because she was sad, but because she missed someone who loved her without being mean. I had to bite the inside of my cheek to stop from crying. Her voice was still small, but it reached places inside me that had been cold for decades. Maybe adults forget what kindness feels like, she said, but I remember, and I saw you all today. Jay leaned forward. All right, that's enough. No, she said, and didn't flinch. You were mean. You laughed at her. You called her names. I don't care if you're older. You were wrong. Marla opened her mouth, but no sound came out. I stepped forward, slowly, standing beside Nova. She's braver than I've ever been, I said, because I let you convince me I wasn't worth defending. Delilah spoke again, quieter this time. We're still your family. Then act like it, I replied. Jay scoffed. So what now? You want us to clap because the kids got a speech ready? Nova turned to him. I don't need you to clap. I just wanted you to stop pretending. The silence that followed was heavier than any insult. It wasn't just awkward, it was accountability, and none of them knew what to do with it. I looked around. You all came here thinking you could challenge a decision that was never yours to make. Grandpa knew who you were. He knew who I was, and he still chose me. Marla shook her head. He should have said something. He did, I said. You just weren't listening. Delilah stood up, slowly, as if the weight of the truth had finally touched her shoulders. She looked at Nova, not with softness, but with something like recognition. She's not wrong, she said. That sentence shifted everything. Even Jay went still. Travis looked up from the floor, blinking. Marla took a breath like she wanted to argue, but nothing came. Nova walked back toward me, slipped her hand into mine. Her fingers were trembling now. You did good, I whispered. Then from behind us, I heard the screen door creak open and the sound of old wood creaking under heavy footsteps. I turned. Uncle Travis was walking inside, toward the bookshelf, toward the drawer where the original will was hidden. Let's see it then, if it's real. Travis stood in the hallway holding the drawer like it weighed more than wood and paper ever should. His voice wasn't angry. It was worse. It was flat. the tone of a man who wanted the world to be simpler than it had just become. All eyes were on him. No one followed. No one spoke. It was like the air had thickened, refusing to move until something shattered. I nodded once and stepped forward, Nova at my side. Her hand had gone cold in mine. Not from fear, but from knowing the moment we had talked about in hushed whispers was finally here. Travis set the drawer down on the dining table. He pulled out the envelope slowly, the one I had tucked behind the row of family photo albums months ago. He held it up like it might bite him. Delilah broke the silence. "You really had it all along." "I did," I said. "I kept it because I didn't want to use it as a weapon. But you all made me your enemy anyway." Jay scoffed. "You think that paper means anything without the rest of us agreeing?" "No," I said, walking to the table. "But it means everything in court. And Grandpa knew that." I opened the envelope carefully. Inside was the original will, yellowed slightly at the corners, signed in his looping hand, notarized and dated. Travis scanned it, slowly, thoroughly. His eyes moved the way they used to when he read contracts at work. Back before retirement softened his spine, but not his mind. When he looked up, his face was pale. "It's legit," he said. Marla snapped, "There has to be a mistake. He wouldn't do that. He wouldn't skip over his own children." Travis didn't answer. He just stepped back and sat down, like the weight of Grandpa's decision had finally pressed into his chest. Delilah stared at the table. "Why didn't he tell me?" "Because he knew you wouldn't listen," I said. "Because telling you meant fighting with you, and he'd already done enough of that in his lifetime." Jay stood up, pacing. "So what? You win? You humiliate us in our own bloodline's house? You turn a little girl into your lawyer and parade her around like some moral compass?" Nova's voice was barely above a whisper. "You did that, not her." He stopped. She didn't blink. "You made Mommy small every time she tried to be kind. You laughed when she walked in, and no one stopped you." The silence returned, louder than before. I held up the will. I never wanted it to come to this. I didn't want to throw papers on a table. I wanted to have one day, just one, where Nova could feel like family didn't mean pain. Delilah opened her mouth, but I raised a hand. "I came here thinking maybe time changed things. But it didn't. You didn't. Grandpa saw that, even when I didn't want to believe it." Jay muttered, "You don't have to stay here and rub it in." "I don't have to stay," I replied, "but I do belong." Marla stood now too, arms crossed. "So what happens next? You kick us out? Tell the neighbors we're vultures?" I looked at her. At all of them. "No," I said. "What happens next is up to you." And then the front door creaked open behind us. I turned, expecting wind. But it wasn't the wind. It was the lawyer who had helped Grandpa finalize the will, and he was holding a second envelope. The lawyer's envelope stayed sealed. No one asked what was inside. No one moved to take it from his hand. Because the truth had already settled like dust after a storm. Undeniable, quiet, and final. One by one they left. Jay was the first. No jokes, no last words, just the sound of gravel crunching beneath expensive shoes. Marla followed close behind, her arms tight across her chest, like she could hold in the version of the world she thought was real. Delilah lingered the longest. She touched the back of a chair like she might sit, then didn't. She looked at me, then at Nova, then at the framed will on the table. "I didn't know," she said. "You didn't want to," I answered. She nodded once, then walked out the door without closing it. Nova stood beside me, small and still. I reached down, brushing the hair back from her cheek. She was watching the door like it might open again, but it didn't. "Are we really free now?" she asked. I looked around. The porch still smelled like smoke and lemon, the laughter had faded into memory, and my chest didn't feel tight anymore. Just full. "Yes," I whispered, "because I finally said something." Later, when the sun dipped below the pines and the air turned gold, I hung Grandpa's photo in the hallway, just above the framed will. Not because I wanted to prove something, but because I wanted to remember that someone had seen me, truly seen me, before I ever saw myself. Nova danced barefoot in the living room, twirling to a melody only she could hear. The house didn't feel haunted anymore. It felt claimed. It felt ours. I didn't expect healing to happen all at once. It didn't. That's the thing no one tells you. Sometimes peace arrives not with an apology, but with the absence of cruelty. Sometimes freedom isn't a roar. It's a whisper that says, you don't have to explain yourself anymore. Uncle Travis returned just as the last light spilled across the porch. He didn't step inside, just stood at the threshold, his voice low. He always said you were the only one who listened. I didn't answer. I just nodded. It was enough. When I closed the front door, I didn't slam it. I didn't need to. I turned the lock, not to shut them out, but to anchor myself in. I stopped waiting for them to invite me in, because I realized this was my home all along. And if you've ever stood at the edge of belonging, if you've ever had to raise your voice just to be seen, or teach your child to be braver than you were, then maybe this story is yours too. If it is, I hope you'll stay a little longer. Leave a piece of your story in the comments. Like this if it reminded you of your own quiet strength. And if it felt like coming home, click subscribe. At Revenge Her Way, this door will always open for you.